The stars twinkled like distant memories of Earth as the massive colony ship Eternal Promise glided through the endless void. The gentle hum of quantum engines filled the vessel, a sound that had become as natural as breathing to the crew. These engines, far more advanced than anything their ancestors had dreamed of, powered the enormous ship that carried over 10,000 souls through space. Captain Jaho Park hadn't slept properly in days. He paced the command center, his boots making soft thuds against the metal floor. The wrinkles around his eyes and the gray streaks in his hair told stories of countless hard decisions and sleepless nights. 200 years had passed since humans were forced to flee Earth, running from the overwhelming might of the Skyborn Empire. That day was burned into humanity's collective memory, the day their world was taken from them. The ship's displays cast a soft blue glow across the command center, creating shadows that danced on the walls. Officers worked quietly at their stations, the silence broken only by the occasional beep of instruments and whispered conversations. They were all descendants of the original refugees, born among the stars, carrying the dream of returning home in their hearts. Lieutenant Hannah Kim sat at her sensor station, her eyes fixed on the readings before her. She had earned her position through years of dedicated service, known for catching details others might miss. Her fingers moved swiftly across the holographic controls as she monitored the space around them. Suddenly, her hands froze. She blinked, double-checked her readings, and then turned to face the captain. "Captain," she called out, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the bridge. "We've detected unusual energy signatures. I've never seen anything like this before." She pulled up the data on the main screen, showing waves of strange energy patterns that pulsed like a heartbeat. Jaiho walked over to her station, leaning in to study the readings. His heart began to race as he recognized what this might mean. The energy pattern matched the theoretical models they had been working on for years. Could it be? After all this time. In the research lab 15 decks below, Dr. Taiwan Lee and his team were already celebrating. They had been working on the quantum displacement technology for decades, passing the project from one generation to the next. The lab was filled with complex machinery, glowing displays, and the excited chatter of scientists who knew they were making history. "The quantum matrix is holding steady," Taiwan announced, his voice trembling with emotion. His team gathered around the main console, watching as the numbers remained stable. "We've done it. We can bypass their defensive systems." The news spread through the ship like wildfire. Crew members passed it along in whispers, then in excited conversations. Soon, the mess halls were buzzing with talk of home, of Earth, of revenge. Children asked their parents to tell them stories of the blue oceans and green forests they had never seen. Messages were sent to other colony ships and settlements, encoded in ways the Skyborn could never crack. Humanity had spread far and wide across the galaxy, establishing hidden colonies on distant worlds. Each colony had developed its own technologies, its own ways of surviving. Now, for the first time in 2 centuries, they had a real chance to fight back. Secret meetings were called. Colony leaders gathered in secure locations, bringing their best military minds and scientific advances. The quantum displacement technology was just the beginning. Each colony had something to contribute: new weapons, better shields, faster ships. In his private quarters, Jaiho looked at an old family photo. It showed his great-great-grandparents standing on Earth, smiling in front of mountains he had never seen. He touched the image gently, thinking of all the generations that had lived and died among the stars, never giving up hope of return. The Eternal Promise would soon live up to its name. Humanity had promised to return, to reclaim their home, to show the Skyborn that they had made a terrible mistake. The enemy thought they had broken humanity's spirit when they drove them from Earth. Instead, they had forced humanity to become stronger, more resourceful, more determined than ever. As Jaiho prepared to send the final confirmation to begin their great plan, he thought about all the children born in space who had never felt real gravity or breathed unfiltered air. They deserved to know their true home. The time had come to fulfill a promise made 200 years ago. The revolution would begin with a whisper, but it would end with humanity's triumphant return to Earth. And this time, they wouldn't be driven away. This time, they were ready. This time, they would win. The Grand Fleet stretched out as far as the eye could see, thousands of ships glittering against the backdrop of New Haven's blue-white sun. Small fighters darted between massive warships, their hulls bearing the marks and colors of different human colonies. Supply vessels moved steadily between the larger ships, preparing them for the long journey ahead. This was humanity's greatest gathering since the exodus from Earth. Admiral Sun Ma Choi stood on the bridge of the Aurora Dawn, her flagship, and the pride of the human fleet. She watched through the massive view screen as another group of ships arrived from the outer colonies, their engines glowing as they took their positions in the formation. Her hands were clasped behind her back, her posture straight and proud, just as she had been taught in the academy. The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, each focused on their vital tasks. Screens displayed constant updates as more ships joined the fleet. Some were sleek and new, products of the most advanced human shipyards. Others were older vessels, upgraded and modified over generations. Each one represented a different part of humanity's journey among the stars. Atlas, humanity's most advanced artificial intelligence, managed the complex dance of ships with ease. Its presence was felt throughout the fleet, coordinating movements and maintaining communications. Dr. Minji Kang had spent 30 years developing Atlas, teaching it not just to think, but to understand human emotions, hopes, and dreams. Fleet status update, Sun Mai requested, her voice calm despite the excitement building in her chest. 8,342 ships are now in formation. Atlas responded, its voice carrying a warmth that Dr. Kang had carefully crafted. 97% of expected vessels have arrived. The remaining ships will join us within 6 hours. Sun Mi nodded, remembering how her grandmother used to tell stories about Earth. Like most of her generation, she had never seen their home world, but she had grown up studying its history, its geography, its beauty. Now, after 2 centuries, they were finally strong enough to take it back. In her private ready room, she reviewed the latest intelligence reports from Earth. The resistance movement, hidden deep beneath the surface, had been preparing for this moment for generations. Commander Jae Sung Cho led these brave souls, keeping human culture alive under the very feet of their oppressors. The door chimed, and Dr. Kang entered. The scientist looked tired but happy, her eyes bright with purpose. Atlas has finished analyzing the skyborne defense patterns, she reported. They haven't changed their strategies in 50 years. They've grown lazy, overconfident. Sun Mi smiled. That's their weakness. They think they've seen everything we can do. They believe we're still the same humans they drove from Earth centuries ago. She walked to the window, watching as more ships moved into position. They don't understand what they created when they forced us to adapt. The fleet represented everything humanity had become. The ships from the mining colonies were heavily armored, built to withstand the harshest conditions. Vessels from the research outposts carried advanced weapons that the Skyborne had never encountered. The agricultural colony ships brought supplies to feed an army, and the manufacturing worlds had produced enough ammunition to fight 100 battles. Atlas supervised it all, its quantum processors coordinating the most complex military operation in human history. The AI had run millions of simulations, learning from each one, perfecting their strategy. It understood humanity's drive to reclaim their home because Dr. Kang had taught it the meaning of belonging. In the ship's massive gathering hall, Sun Mi addressed her fleet commanders. Officers from every colony stood before her, their uniforms displaying a rainbow of ranks and origins. But they all wore the same symbol now, the image of Earth surrounded by stars. The Skyborn believe they know us, she told them, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. They think we're scattered, divided, weak. They've grown complacent in their victory, confident that we could never challenge them again. She paused, letting her words sink in. They're wrong. Deep beneath Earth's surface, Commander Jae-Sung Cho received the coded message. The Resistance had waited generations for this signal, passing down their mission from parent to child. They had preserved human art, music, and knowledge, while gathering crucial information about the Skyborn's weaknesses. The Resistance fighters began moving through their hidden tunnels, preparing the ancient weapons and equipment they had maintained for 2 centuries. They were humanity's secret weapon, an army the Skyborn didn't know existed, ready to strike from below while the fleet attacked from above. As the final ships took their positions, Sunmi felt the weight of history on her shoulders. This was humanity's moment, their chance to reclaim everything they had lost. The fleet was ready. Atlas was ready. The Resistance was ready. She gave the order that would begin humanity's greatest battle. All ships, prepare for quantum jump. We're going home. Reality twisted and bent as thousands of human ships burst into existence near Jupiter's massive form. The gas giant's swirling storms provided a dramatic backdrop for humanity's first strike against their ancient enemy. Captain Do-hyun Nam stood on the bridge of the assault carrier, Swift Justice, his eyes fixed on the skyborne defense platforms that dotted Jupiter's orbital space. The massive defense network had stood undefeated for 2 centuries, a mix of automated weapons platforms and crude battle stations. The Skyborn believed it was unbeatable. They were about to learn how wrong they were. All ships report ready, his first officer announced, voice steady despite the tension filling the bridge. Around them, crew members worked at their stations, each movement precise and practiced. They had trained for this moment countless times, but now it was real. Do-hyun took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "Atlas, begin Protocol Sunrise," he commanded. The AI's presence filled the ship's systems, its quantum processors reaching out across space to touch the Skyborn network. Initiating cyber warfare protocols. Atlas responded, its voice calm and assured, beginning penetration of Skyborn security systems. The AI's attack was unlike anything the Skyborn had ever faced. Their encryptions, unchanged for decades, crumbled before Atlas's quantum algorithms. Warning systems across the Skyborn network began to fail. Defense platforms went dark one by one, their weapons powering down, their shields falling. The few Skyborn crews manning the stations found themselves locked out of their own systems, helpless as their supposedly impregnable defenses were stripped away. On Earth, deep beneath the surface in a hidden bunker, Yoo-Jin Park received the signal she had waited for her entire life. Her hands moved swiftly over ancient controls, activating devices that Resistance fighters had spent generations planting throughout Skyborn installations. The sabotage devices were masterpieces of patient engineering, built piece by piece over decades, smuggled into place by workers who would never live to see them used. Now they came to life, spreading confusion and chaos through Skyborn communications, power systems, and defense networks. Back in space, Do-hyun watched as the first Skyborn response ships emerged from their bases. They moved with confusion, their commands scrambled, their formations broken before they began. The human fleet had trained for this moment, practicing their attacks until they could perform them in their sleep. "All strike groups, commence attack pattern Delta," Do-hyun ordered. His words triggered a carefully choreographed dance of destruction. Smaller attack ships darted forward, their new quantum weapons tearing through the confused Skyborn vessels. Larger warships moved into position, their guns targeting key defensive positions. The Skyborn commanders tried to rally their forces, but Atlas was everywhere in their systems. Emergency orders were lost or redirected. Distress calls went unheard. For the first time in centuries, the mighty Skyborn military found itself fighting blind and deaf. On one of the few remaining active defense platforms, a Skyborn commander watched in horror as human ships systematically destroyed everything he had believed was indestructible. His fingers flew across control panels, trying to restore systems that stubbornly refused to respond. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his crew. "They're supposed to be primitive. They're supposed to be weak. But the humans he saw through his viewport were neither primitive nor weak. They moved with precision and purpose, their ships displaying technology that matched or exceeded his own. Do-hyun allowed himself a small smile as another defense platform went dark. His great-grandmother had been just a child when the Skyborn drove humanity from Earth. She had told him stories of that day, of the fear and confusion, of the helplessness they had felt. Now the Skyborn would know that same fear. The battle for Jupiter's orbit lasted less than an hour. When it was over, humanity's ships moved through a graveyard of broken Skyborn vessels and ruined defense platforms. The way to Earth lay open before them. "Send word to Admiral Choi," Do-hyun ordered. "Jupiter's orbital space is secured. The first phase is complete." He watched as his crews began securing their prisoners and salvaging useful technology. The Skyborn survivors they captured seemed unable to comprehend what had happened to them. In her hidden bunker on Earth, Yu-jin received confirmation of the victory. She allowed herself a moment to imagine the confusion and fear spreading through Skyborn command centers across the planet. Soon, they would learn what it meant to face a humanity that had spent 2 centuries preparing for revenge. The first strike had been perfectly executed, but it was only the beginning. As Do-hyun's ships secured their positions around Jupiter, the main fleet prepared for the next phase of the attack. Humanity's long exile was coming to an end, and they were coming home with a vengeance that would shake the stars themselves. The red dust of Mars swirled around the landing ships as they descended through the thin atmosphere. Colonel Jae-hyun saw them wash from the lead vessel as thousands of human troops prepared for the largest ground battle since the Exodus. Above them, the sky flashed with explosions as Captain Hyunwoo Kim's fleet engaged the Skyborn orbital defenses. Through the viewport, Jae-hyun could see the massive terraforming engines that the Skyborn had built on Mars' surface. These towering structures had been slowly transforming the Red Planet, but today they would become a battlefield. Her troops had trained for years in simulated Martian gravity, learning to use every aspect of the harsh environment to their advantage. "Ground teams, final equipment check," she ordered, her voice carrying to every soldier in the landing force. Around her, troops adjusted their combat suits and checked their quantum rifles. These weapons were unlike anything the Skyborn had faced before, capable of bypassing their strongest shields. The first wave of dropships touched down in a perfect circle around their primary target. Soldiers poured out, moving with the practiced ease that came from countless drills. The Skyborn defenders responded quickly, their own troops emerging from fortified positions. "Remember your training," Jae-hyun called out as she led her team from the ship. "Use the low gravity to your advantage. They still think we fight like we did on Earth." Her words were punctuated by the sound of quantum weapons firing, their distinctive hum filling the thin Martian air. Above the planet, Captain Hyunwoo Kim directed the space battle from his flagship. The Skyborn had gathered their largest remaining fleet to defend Mars, but they were fighting an enemy that had evolved far beyond their expectations. Human ships moved in complex patterns that Atlas had developed, each maneuver calculated to maximize their advantages. "Target their command vessels," Hyunwoo ordered as another wave of Skyborn ships approached. "Don't let them coordinate their defenses." His crews responded with precision, their quantum weapons cutting through Skyborn shields like they weren't there. On the surface, Jae-hyun's forces pushed steadily toward the main terraforming complex. The Skyborn defenders fought desperately, but they couldn't match the humans' mobility in the low gravity. Years of training paid off as human soldiers used their jump jets to bound between cover, attacking from unexpected angles. "They're falling back to the terraforming station," Jae-hyun reported as her troops secured another sector. "Just as we predicted." The human advance had been carefully planned to herd the Skyborn defenders into a position where they could be trapped. The Skyborn commander, watching his forces crumble before the human assault, made a desperate decision. "Initiate self-destruct sequences on all terraforming engines," he ordered. "If we can't hold Mars, we'll make sure they can't use it either." But Atlas had been waiting for this moment. The AI had already infiltrated the terraforming systems, using access codes gathered by resistance spies over decades. Instead of destroying the engines, the self-destruct command gave Atlas complete control. "Terraforming engines are now under our control," Atlas announced to both Jai-Yun and Hyunwoo, beginning power redistribution to support ground operations. The massive engines hummed with new purpose, their energy now powering human shield generators and weapon systems. The Skyborne defenders, realizing their last resort had failed, began to surrender. Jai-Yun walked among her troops as they secured prisoners and fortified their positions. She could see Earth hanging in the Martian sky, a blue jewel that had haunted humanity's dreams for 2 centuries. "The planet's scars run deep," an older surgeon said, looking up at Earth. 200 years of skyborne occupation have changed it. Jai-Yun nodded. "But under those scars, Earth is still alive, still waiting for us to come home." She turned to watch as more human ships descended through the Martian atmosphere, bringing reinforcements and supplies. The battle for Mars had been won, but the greatest challenge still lay ahead. In orbit, Hyunwoo received reports from his captains as they secured the space around Mars. The Skyborne fleet had been demolished, their once proud ships now drifting as wreckage. His own forces had taken losses, but far fewer than expected. "Send word to Admiral Choi," he ordered. "Mars is secured. We're ready to begin the final phase." His message would trigger the gathering of the entire human fleet for their last push toward Earth. Jai-Yun gathered her officers for a briefing as the Martian sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and orange. They had won a crucial victory, but no one was celebrating yet. Every soldier knew that the hardest part of their journey home still lay ahead. "Earth is watching," she told them, pointing to the distant blue planet. "Our people have waited for 2 centuries, hiding in the deepest bunkers, preserving our culture and heritage. Now we show the Skyborne why they should have finished us when they had the chance." The quantum weapons were prepped, the ships were refueled, and humanity's armies stood ready. Mars had proven that their new technology could defeat the Skyborne. Now it was time to take back what was rightfully theirs. The final battle for Earth was about to begin. The blue sphere of Earth dominated the view as humanity's fleet emerged from quantum space. Admiral Sunmai stood on her bridge, watching as thousands of ships took their positions around humanity's ancient home. The Skyborne orbital defense network bristled with weapons, their massive platforms forming a steel web around the planet. "All ships report ready for combat," her tactical officer announced. The crew of the Aurora Dawn worked with focused intensity, each person knowing their role in the coming battle. This was the moment everything had led to, the final fight for Earth. The Skyborne response was immediate and overwhelming. Their remaining ships poured from hidden bases, forming up to defend their stolen world. Their fleet was still impressive, despite the losses at Jupiter and Mars. Energy readings showed they had activated every weapon system they possessed. "Atlas, begin combat operations," Sunmai ordered. The AI's presence spread through the human fleet, coordinating their movements with inhuman precision. Ships began moving in complex patterns that looked chaotic, but were precisely calculated to maximize their effectiveness. For Earth, the battle cry originated from a young pilot in the fighter squadrons, but it spread quickly across all communication channels. Soon the words echoed from ship to ship, a reminder of why they fought. The first exchanges of fire lit up Earth's orbit like new stars being born. Quantum weapons sliced through skyborne shields, while conventional weapons created a deadly crossfire. Fighters darted between capital ships, their pilots pushing their craft to the absolute limit. Below the massive space battle, Major Se-Jin Kwon led the first wave of ground forces toward Earth's surface. Their drop ships were heavily shielded, designed to punch through any remaining orbital defenses. "Landing teams, prepare for atmospheric entry," he commanded, checking his own equipment one final time. The resistance responded to their arrival with perfect timing. All across Earth's surface, hidden bunkers opened. Men and women who had spent their entire lives preparing for this moment emerged, carrying weapons that had been maintained for generations. They struck at skyborne ground installations with devastating effect. Atlas managed it all, its quantum processors handling millions of variables every second. The AI directed ships to where they were needed most, predicted enemy movements before they happened, and ensured that every human attack had maximum impact. Dr. Minji's creation was proving its worth beyond anyone's expectations. Multiple skyborne platforms breaking formation, the tactical officer reported. The massive orbital defense stations were starting to fall, their advanced technology proving insufficient against humanity's new weapons. Each destroyed platform created a gap in the skyborne defenses that human ships quickly exploited. Seijin's dropships hit the atmosphere as the orbital battle reached its peak. Brace for landing, he ordered as his vessels pushed through clouds for the first time. Below them, resistance fighters were already securing landing zones, using their intimate knowledge of Earth's surface to outmaneuver skyborne ground forces. The skyborne commanders tried desperately to coordinate their defense, but they were overwhelmed by attacks from every direction. Their orbital platforms were being destroyed one after another, their ground forces were being pushed back by the resistance, and their space fleet was being systematically taken apart by quantum weapons they couldn't counter. "We've broken through their main line," Sun Mai announced as another group of skyborne ships retreated. Her fleet pressed the advantage, pushing deeper into Earth orbit. The battle was far from over, but the momentum had clearly shifted. Seijin's forces touched down in what had once been called Asia. His troops moved quickly to secure their landing zones, linking up with resistance fighters who emerged from hidden tunnels. The skyborne ground forces fought back hard, but they were caught between two enemies, and their positions were starting to collapse. Atlas continued its relentless coordination of the battle. The AI's quantum algorithms predicted and countered every skyborne tactic, turning their own strategies against them. It was a display of technological superiority that the skyborne had never expected from the humans they had dismissed as primitive. As the battle entered its sixth hour, the outcome was becoming clear. The mighty skyborne defense network, which had kept humanity away from Earth for 2 centuries, was falling apart. Their ships were being destroyed or forced to retreat, their orbital platforms were being systematically eliminated, and their ground forces were losing control of the surface. "We've waited for this moment for 200 years, Sun Mai said to her crew as they watched another skyborne platform explode. "Our ancestors never lost hope. They never gave up. And now we're taking back what's ours." The space around Earth was filled with debris from destroyed ships and stations, creating a new ring of artificial material around the planet. But through that debris, human ships continued to advance, pushing the remaining skyborne forces further back. Seijin's ground forces secured their objectives one by one, working in perfect coordination with the resistance fighters. The skyborne troops they captured seemed shocked by the precision and effectiveness of the human attack. They had never imagined that their victims could become so formidable. As the battle for Earth's orbit reached its final stages, Sun Mai allowed herself a small smile. Humanity had not just survived their exile. They had used it to become stronger than their oppressors ever thought possible. The path to Earth's surface was nearly clear, and the final phase of the liberation was about to begin. Smoke rose from the ruins of what had once been Seoul as General Daehyun Park led his forces toward the massive skyborne command center. The structure dominated the cityscape, its alien architecture a constant reminder of their long occupation. Around him, human soldiers moved through the streets with purpose, their quantum weapons ready. The sound of battle echoed through the ancient city. Resistance fighters who had lived their entire lives in underground bunkers fought alongside troops from the colonies, their combined knowledge making them an unstoppable force. They had already secured most of the city, pushing the skyborne back to their final stronghold. Inside a mobile command center, Dr. Minji worked frantically with Atlas, their combined efforts focused on preventing the skyborne from using their doomsday weapons. "They're trying to access the terraforming controls," she reported, her fingers flying across holographic displays. They want to make Earth uninhabitable. If we can't have it, no one will. The message from the Skyborn Supreme Commander broadcast across all frequencies. Their desperation was clear in every word. We'll turn your precious Earth into a wasteland before we surrender it to primitives. But Atlas had already wormed its way deep into the Skyborn systems. The AI's quantum algorithms had been breaking through their security for hours, taking control of crucial systems one by one. The resistance fighters had spent generations planting backdoors and sabotage devices throughout the Skyborn network. Keep pushing forward, Da-hyun ordered as another section of the command center's outer defenses fell. Human soldiers used their superior mobility and quantum weapons to overcome every obstacle. The Skyborn defenders fought desperately, but they were facing an enemy that had spent 2 centuries preparing for this moment. In underground bunkers beneath the city, resistance teams disabled backup control systems that the Skyborn had never known were compromised. Each sabotaged system represented years of patient work, as generation after generation of resistance fighters carried out their part of the master plan. Dr. Minji watched as Atlas countered another Skyborn attempt to activate their weapons. They're getting desperate, she told Da-hyun. They're trying everything, but nothing's working. The AI had predicted and prepared for every contingency, its quantum processors always staying one step ahead. The battle for the command center intensified as human forces breached the main walls. Colonial troops fought alongside Earth resistance fighters, their different combat styles complementing each other perfectly. The resistance knew every corner and passage of the building, while the colonial forces brought their advanced technology and training. They're falling back to the central chamber, Da-hyun reported as another section was secured. The Skyborn Supreme Commander had gathered their remaining forces for a final stand, but they were running out of options. Their backup systems were offline, their weapons were failing, and their defenses were crumbling. Through the broken windows of the command center, both humans and Skyborn could see ships still battling in the sky above. The space around Earth was filled with debris from destroyed orbital platforms and vessels, but human ships clearly dominated the battle now. In their desperation, the Skyborn tried one last gambit. They attempted to overload the city's power grid, hoping to trigger a chain reaction that would devastate the region. But Atlas had seen this coming too. The AI smoothly rerouted power through systems that resistance fighters had modified over decades. Your weapons are useless, Dr. Minji announced over the command center's communication system. Your controls are compromised. Your backup systems are sabotage. Surrender now. Her voice carried the weight of 2 centuries of preparation and determination. The Skyborn Supreme Commander, watching as human forces approached his position from all directions, finally began to understand. They had never truly conquered humanity. They had only forced them to become stronger, more resourceful, more determined than ever before. How? He demanded as human troops breached the central chamber. How did you become this powerful? The answer was written on the faces of every human soldier and resistance fighter who entered the room. 200 years of exile had not broken humanity. It had forged them into something the Skyborn could never have imagined. Da-hyun stepped forward, his quantum rifle aimed steadily at the Supreme Commander. You should have killed us all when you had the chance, he said simply. Instead, you gave us time to learn, to grow, to become stronger than you ever were. The last shots of the battle echoed through the ancient city as the remaining Skyborn forces laid down their weapons. Dr. Minji and Atlas confirmed that all doomsday devices had been neutralized. The resistance emerged fully from their hidden bunkers, finally able to walk freely on the surface of their home world. As the dust settled over Seoul, humans looked up at their planet's sky for the first time in 2 centuries without fear. They had not just survived, they had triumphed. The Skyborn's greatest mistake had been believing that driving humanity from Earth would break their spirit. Instead, it had created an enemy they could never hope to defeat. Golden rays of sunlight pierced the morning clouds, painting Earth's sky in colors that no image or recording could have prepared them for. Captain Jai-Ho Park, his hair now streaked with gray from the long campaign, knelt and pressed his hand against the soil of his ancestral home. Tears filled his eyes as he felt real Earth between his fingers for the first time in his life. Around him, other humans from the colonies were having similar emotional moments. Some lay flat on the grass, spreading their arms wide as if to embrace the planet itself. Others stood in awe, watching birds soar through the air. Real birds, not the simulated ones they had grown up with in the colony habitats. Dr. Tawan moved through the gathering crowd, his scientific instruments measuring the state of Earth's environment. The skyborne occupation had changed much, but the planet's fundamental systems remained intact. The damage can be repaired, he announced to a group of eager listeners. Earth remembers its original state. We just need to help it heal. Commander Jae-sung emerged from one of the resistance bunkers, leading a group of Earth-born humans to meet their space-born cousins. The reunions were both joyous and awkward, two branches of humanity, separated for 2 centuries, learning to become one people again. Your ancestors never lost faith, Jae-sung told a young colonial child who stared wide-eyed at the open sky. They kept their promise that humanity would return. And now you're here. The resistance fighters had preserved countless stories, songs, and traditions from Earth's past, maintaining humanity's cultural heritage through generations of hiding. EDLAS coordinated the massive influx of ships bringing more colonists home every hour. The AI had shifted seamlessly from military operations to managing the complex logistics of resettlement. Its quantum processors tracked housing assignments, resource distribution, and the integration of colonial and resistance communities. In what had once been a skyborne control center, Dr. Minji worked with ATLAS to convert alien technology for human use. Their terraforming systems can be reprogrammed, she explained to a team of engineers. We can use them to heal the damage they caused. The very machines that had been used to alter Earth would now help restore it. Admiral Sunmai stood on the observation deck of the new planetary defense headquarters, watching as ships from every human colony approached Earth. Each vessel carried families returning to their species' birthplace, bringing with them the knowledge and innovations developed during their exile among the stars. The skyborne prisoners, now confined to designated areas, watched in amazement as humans transformed their military victory into a triumph of reconstruction. The speed and efficiency with which their former victims organized the restoration efforts defied their understanding. They still don't understand, Jae-ho said to Sunmai as they observed a group of children playing in real rain for the first time. They thought breaking our connection to Earth would weaken us. Instead, it gave us a dream worth fighting for. The work of reclamation continued day and night. Colonial agricultural experts worked alongside resistance members who knew Earth's seasons and soil. Engineers from the manufacturing worlds combined their advanced technology with the Resistance's intimate knowledge of Earth's infrastructure. Atlas's presence was felt everywhere, its quantum networks linking every restoration project. The AI had evolved beyond its military origins, becoming a crucial part of humanity's renewed civilization. It coordinated everything from weather pattern analysis to cultural exchange programs between colonial and resistance communities. As weeks passed, the first new cities began to rise. They combined the best of colonial technology with Earth's natural beauty, creating something neither the colonies nor the resistance could have built alone. Gardens and parks were planted, schools were opened, and markets sprang up where humans from space and Earth could trade goods and stories. Standing on a hilltop overlooking one of these new settlements, Jae-ho watched the sunset with Dr. Tawan. "Do you think we can really restore it all?" he asked the scientist. Tawan smiled, showing him readings from his instruments. "Earth is already healing itself," he said. "The planet knows its children have come home. We just need to protect it while it recovers." In orbit, the debris of battle was being cleared away, replaced by new defensive platforms that combined human quantum technology with modified skyborne systems. Never again would Earth be vulnerable to invasion. Never again would humanity be driven from their home. As darkness fell, lights came on in homes and streets across the planet. In the new cities, humans from the colonies learned Earth's old songs from resistance children. In the countryside, colonial farmers worked by starlight, relearning the rhythms of natural seasons. In laboratories and control centers, scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to heal their planet's wounds. Earth belonged to humanity once more, and this time, they would never let it go. They had not just reclaimed their home. They had become strong enough to keep it forever. The dream that had sustained them through 2 centuries of exile had finally come true. And now they could begin writing the next chapter of human history.